The most dangerous weapon in history isn't a bomb or a bullet, it's a currency. A specific type of money created in a moment of desperation that has a 100% failure rate. It has toppled empires, obliterated savings, and plunged continents into darkness, and we are repeating the exact same recipe today. It's a pattern etched in the stone of history with the blood of economies. The pattern always begins with a promise of stability, of prosperity, of a shortcut to power. But that promise is a poison. Let's go back to the first great collapse, 13th century China under the Mongol Yuan dynasty. Kublai Khan had built the largest contiguous land empire in human history, but conquest is expensive. Paying armies, building infrastructure, maintaining control, it drained the treasury of silver and silk. So in 1260, they made a revolutionary decision. They created the world's first standardized paper currency, the Jiaochao. It was backed by silk and silver reserves. It was efficient, lightweight, and the Khan decreed death for anyone who refused it. The system worked for a while, but then the temptation grew. The Mongol war machine was insatiable. New campaigns in Japan and Southeast Asia demanded unimaginable sums of money. The solution was simple and catastrophic. They started printing. Not just a little, but a flood of paper with no increase in their silver reserves. The value of the Jiaochao began to plummet. By 1309, it took 1,500 strings of paper notes to buy what one string had bought just decades before. They tried a classic move. They introduced a new note, worth 1,000 of the old ones. It was a confidence trick, and everyone knew it. The weight of the press crushes the weight of the coin. The Yuan dynasty didn't fall to a superior army. It collapsed from within. By the 1340-60s, hyperinflation had shattered the economy. Peasants starved, merchants went bankrupt, and trust in the government evaporated. The Red Turban Rebellion exploded, fueled by economic despair. The mighty Mongol Empire, the terror of the world, was brought to its knees not by swords but by paper. The lesson was written in fire and ruin, and it was completely ignored. Because 3 centuries later, on the other side of the world, a new empire was making the same fatal error. France, 1715. The Sun King, Louis XIV, was dead. He left behind a glittering palace at Versailles and a kingdom drowning in debt from decades of war. The treasury was empty, the state was bankrupt. Into this crisis stepped a Scottish financier named John Law. He was a visionary, a gambler, and he offered the French regent a seemingly magical solution. Law convinced the monarchy to establish a national bank, the Banque Générale, which could issue paper money. He then created the Mississippi Company, a speculative venture tied to the vast, imagined riches of the Louisiana Territory. He merged the company with the bank and the state's debt. It was financial alchemy. He was turning government debt into company shares and shares into paper currency. For a moment, it was the most brilliant success in economic history. The streets of Paris ran with speculative frenzy. The word millionaire was invented to describe the new rich made by Mississippi Company stock. People from all classes sold their property, their jewels, anything to get a piece of the action. The price of shares skyrocketed. The Banque Royale, now under Law's complete control, printed money relentlessly to fuel the buying mania. The paper notes flowed unmoored from their gold and silver backing, but reality is a tide that always comes back in. The truth about Louisiana was bleak. It was a swampy, disease-ridden wilderness, not a city of gold. When a few savvy investors tried to cash out their astronomical paper profits for solid gold coins, the flaw in the system was exposed. There wasn't nearly enough gold. Panic erupted. The value of both the shares and the paper currency imploded in a chain reaction. The French economy vaporized. The rich became paupers overnight. The poor starved. The echo of a broken promise never fades. The French Revolution didn't happen in 1789. Its seeds were planted in the ashes of John Law's system in 1720. The monarchy's credibility was destroyed. The social contract was torn to shreds. The bitter resentment against a financial elite that had robbed the people festered for generations, finally exploding in the guillotine's reign of terror. The Bourbon dynasty was doomed the moment the printing presses started to run. One empire fell to war, the next to speculation. The mechanism was the same, a currency unmoored from reality. And then came the third and most terrifying example, the one that looks the most like our own world, the Weimar Republic, Germany, 1921. The nation was staggering under the crushing reparations of the Treaty of Versailles. The government's solution? Print the money to pay its debts. At first it was manageable, but soon it became a death spiral. The government ran the printing presses day and night, producing mountains of paper marks. Workers were paid twice a day because their morning wages would be worthless by the afternoon. They carried wheelbarrows full of cash to buy a single loaf of bread. People used banknotes as wallpaper because it was cheaper than buying actual wallpaper. In 1914, a dollar was worth 4 marks. By November 1923, it was worth 4 trillion marks. This wasn't just an economic collapse, it was the unraveling of society itself. Life savings vanished in the space of an hour. Pensions became a cruel joke. The middle class, the bedrock of any stable society, was utterly annihilated. They had played by the rules, saved their money, and were rewarded with absolute destitution. In this vacuum of despair, amid the burning piles of worthless currency, what began to grow? Extremism, radicalism. People were desperate for order, for a scapegoat, for a strongman who promised to restore their dignity and purge the system. The currency of the Weimar Republic didn't just destroy an economy. It forged the political weapon that would plunge the entire world into darkness. The pattern is undeniable. The UN, the French monarchy, the Weimar Republic. 3 empires destroyed by the same weapon. A currency system deliberately devalued to serve the short-term interests of the state. Each time the elites thought they were in control. Each time they believed they were the exception to the rule. And each time they were consumed by the very fire they started. This is not a coincidence. It is a law of financial physics. And right now we are testing that law once again. The ashes of Weimar settled. The world had learned its lesson, or so it seemed. For a time, money was hard. It was gold-backed, disciplined, and real. The Bretton Woods system, established after World War II, tethered the world's major currencies to the US dollar, which was in turn backed by gold. It was a system built on the graves of failed empires, a deliberate attempt to impose discipline. But discipline is fragile, and the temptation of easy money is eternal. The turning point came in 1971. President Richard Nixon, facing domestic spending pressures and the cost of the Vietnam War, made a historic decision. He severed the US dollar's last link to gold. The world moved to a system of pure fiat currency, money that has value only because the government says it does. It was the ultimate act of faith, a faith that those in power would not abuse the privilege. For decades, it worked well enough. We built an era of prosperity on a promise, but the pattern was merely dormant, not dead. The 2008 financial crisis was our John Law moment. The banks had created a speculative bubble in housing debt. When it popped, the entire system faced collapse. The solution? Print. Governments and central banks around the world unleashed a tidal wave of new money, quantitative easing, to bail out the system. It was presented as a necessary, one-time emergency measure. The emergency never ended. The crisis revealed a terrifying truth. The printing press had become a permanent fixture. We have spent the last 15 years in a controlled demolition of our own currency's value. The COVID-19 pandemic was the next logical step. The response was to unleash a monetary fire hose of staggering proportions. In just 2 years, the U.S. Federal Reserve's balance sheet exploded from $4 trillion to nearly $9 trillion. The money supply, M2, shot up by over 40%. This wasn't a trickle. It was a tsunami of liquidity flooding the global economy. They told us it wouldn't cause inflation. They were wrong. We are repeating a ritual we don't understand. Look at the numbers, not the speeches. The U.S. national debt now exceeds $34 trillion. It is a figure so large it becomes meaningless to most people. So break it down. That's over $100,000 for every single person in the country. The interest payments on that debt alone are now surpassing $1 trillion a year, more than the entire military budget. This is not a sustainable path. This is the prelude to a collapse. The first stage is always inflation. We felt it in the grocery stores, at the gas pumps, in our rent. It's a silent tax on everyone who holds dollars. It erodes savings and punishes thrift. But this is just the symptom, not the disease. The disease is the deliberate devaluation of the currency to manage an unpayable debt. The elites are playing a dangerous game. They are betting they can control the fire this time. This is where the conflict becomes undeniable. It's you, the saver, the wage earner, against the machinery of the state and the financial system. Your purchasing power is being systematically transferred to the debtors, to the government, to the connected elites who get the new money first. By the time it reaches you, it's been diluted. You are losing, and you don't even see the battlefield. The Weimar Germans didn't see it coming either. Until their life's work was kindling, we are now in the phase of currency debasement that precedes the true crisis. The phase where trust begins to fray at the edges. The phase where people start looking for exits. The phase where the government's response is not to stop the printing, but to seek more control. Digital currency, a centrally controlled, programmable money that would give them ultimate power over every transaction. They will sell it as a convenience, a tool against crime. Do not believe them. It is the final piece of the puzzle. It is the mechanism for total financial surveillance and control. It is the tool that would allow them to impose negative interest rates directly on your savings, to dictate what you can and cannot buy, to turn your money off with a click if you step out of line. This is the end game of the fiat experiment. Not freedom, but absolute authority. The three empires of the past fell to hyperinflation and societal collapse. Ours is being engineered for a digital cage. So what do? How do you survive a pattern that has crushed every society that has encountered it? The lessons from the ashes are clear. First, get out of the line of fire. Move your savings out of pure cash and cash equivalents. Long-term government bonds are a promise from the same institution that is devaluing the currency. They are a trap. The historical winners in these periods are the holders of real scarce assets, assets that cannot be printed. This means productive land. It means productive businesses that you own shares in. And above all, it means historic monetary metals, particularly gold and silver. For 5,000 years, gold has been the ultimate arbiter of value. It is no one's liability. It cannot be printed. It has survived the collapse of every single fiat currency ever created. It is the silent guardian that preserved wealth through the fall of the yuan, the French monarchy, and the Weimar Republic. But this time is different because we have a new technology, a digital heir to gold. Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies represent a fundamental break from the past. They are a decentralized, scarce, verifiable form of money that exists outside the control of any government or bank. They are the antithesis of the Jiaochao, the Banque Royale note, and the Weimar mark. They are not a perfect solution, but they are a profound option, a way to opt out of the system entirely. They are a bet on a network, not a nation. Do not wait for the final act. The time to build your lifeboat is while the ship still appears steady. The pattern is clear. The currency that destroyed 3 empires is not a specific coin or note. It is the system of unsound money. It is the political choice to devalue, to inflate, to steal silently rather than tax openly. We are deep within that pattern now. The warning signs are flashing red. The only question is whether we will be the 4th empire on the list, or the first generation to learn the lesson and change the ending. This is not about predicting a specific date of collapse. It is about recognizing a trajectory. The weight of history is pressing down on our present. The ghosts of Kublai Khan, John Law, and the Weimar bureaucrats are watching. They are waiting to see if we too will follow the script. The choice to see the pattern is the first step to breaking it. The choice to protect your wealth is a vote for a different future. A future not built on a foundation of paper promises, but on the bedrock of real, scarce, and uncontrollable value. The final collapse of trust is always an event, but the road to that event is a process. We are on that road right now. You can feel the pavement cracking beneath your feet. You can see the signs of decay in every inflated asset price and every empty government promise. The great monetary experiment of the last 50 years is reaching its climax. It will not end with a whimper, but with a bang that will reshape the global order. The empires of the past were defined by their borders and their armies. The next empire to fall will be defined by its currency. And when it does, the world will remember the oldest rule of all. You cannot print value. You can only destroy it.